The second brawler coming in this update of Brawl Stars is an epic tank named Trunk. Now this brawler is a lot better than you would think, so let me tell you all about him and then put him 1v1 versus every brawler in the game. Trunk is the final member of the Enchanted Woods trio, joining Lily and Cordelius. This brawler is actually a hollowed out tree that has been invaded by ants seeking revenge. Does that make sense? Now at max level, Trunk has 10,000 hit points, which is pretty average for a tank. Now for his main shot, or I guess it's their main shot because it's a bunch of ants. So for their main shot, they spin in a circle, dealing damage all around them. The further away you are from Trunk, the more damage you take. Now there's also a small outer ring that will deal max damage, so it's best to try to hit somebody right on the edge of his shot. In addition to damage, for every shot that they fire, they leave behind a pile of ants on the ground. Now, if Trunk is standing on this pile of ants, he will gain a 20% movement speed boost as well as a 30% damage boost. By doing this and then hitting the outside part of the circle, the damage can ramp up to 3,640 damage per shot. Now, these ants don't just affect Trunk though, because both their star powers can give the ants more power. Now, the first star power is called a new insect of overlords, and with this, any enemy that stands on the ants gets their damage reduced by 15%. Now the second star power, called Colony Scouts, will reveal hidden enemies either in a bush or invisible. So you want to make the most of these ants and the area that they leave, and that's what their first gadget, called For the Queen, does. When you press this gadget, it'll spread out ants in a very large area. This gives you room to roam around and still get the buffs or debuffing the enemy. And finally, the last thing the ants can do comes from the second gadget, called Worker Ants. With this one, when pressed, the first source of damage that you take gets turned into healing through mystical ant magic. Yeah, that's not a thing, but I mean, it's Brawl Stars, so anything goes. Trunk's super is pretty cool as well, because with this, they will dash forward, sort of like Daryl, but anyone that they hit along the way will take a bunch of small damage, as well as they will leave behind a pile of ants in their path. Now, it's not crazy powerful, but it has utility to go along with it, and it can bounce off of walls too, like Daryl. So now that you know all about Trunk, let's see how they fare against the rest of the brawlers in the game in these base level interactions, starting with Trunk's fellow tanks. Now it's a bit tough here because I wanted to show off Trunk's potential, but to do that, we have to have these tanks stand a little bit back further away than they would like. If Bull would have been up close, he would have won easy, but instead Trunk wins by a few frames. The range doesn't hurt Rosa though, although she still loses, but Daryl takes the disadvantage and still wins. Jackie and Trunk, well, they're pretty much a dead tie. Frank wins in a drawn-out battle here thanks to his almost 15,000 hit points, but Trunk deals a lot more damage than BB and wins. Ash takes it down to the wire and with one last shot prevails, but Hank's bubble proves to be not enough to chop down Trunk. Buster at a distance doesn't stand much of a chance, but like Bull, if you put him up close, he walks away with a decisive victory. Ollie doesn't deal nearly enough damage to come out on top, and Meg gets knocked out of her mech, keeps firing, however Trunk just casually walks on up to her and finishes her off. Draco and his mark waste no time though, obliterating Trunk. So a 7-6 record isn't too bad for a brawler that's only an epic, but also has a lot of utility. That being said, Trunk would have racked up a couple more losses had these tanks been up real close, but I think that what we saw gives us a good idea of how we want to play him against these other tanks. He isn't a brawler that's going to just rush in and take people down. It's going to be a lot harder not only to hit that sweet spot, but also to try to get the boost from his ants while doing it so he can get that extra damage. But bottom line, he is right at home in this class, and he has some extra benefits where he lacks in his unload speed and his power. And speaking of power, let's see if the assassins have what it takes to make firewood out of this brand new brawler. Normally, assassins don't want to cozy up next to tanks as they just have too much power and hit points. However, Sam is right there with him, and that was without throwing his knuckle busters. Shade almost has enough to get him, and Mortis, he gives it his best shot, but his reload speed betrays him as Trunk wins. Buzz can't use his stun here, which would normally be his advantage, and Fang gives him the old 3 kicks, but he needed 4. Miko's jumps get perfectly timed and he is gone quickly, and Melody, well, she can't get her damage ramped up from the notes in time. Lily gives him a poke, but it doesn't break his bark. However, the new brawler Allie leaps in and absolutely wrecks him. Crow gets 2 shot, but at least does some damage. However, Leon is able to take him down with his shurikens. Cord may be the leader of this trio, but he isn't the toughest. And surprisingly, Kenji falls just short thanks to Trunk's star power that reduces enemy damage. And finally, the ultra legendary brawler Kaze gets beat not only in ninja form, but also in geisha form as well, showing that rarity isn't everything. So a 14-2 record against the assassins is impressive, but it is what you would really expect from a tank, so it's not too surprising. Now in a game, Trunk is a hard target to take down thanks to his 360-degree attack, as well as the buffs and debuffs from the ants. And with the right star power, he might make it hard for these assassins to sneak around, as those ants would reveal their position in the grass. All of that being said though, if he's missing almost any health, he is going to be a target that is susceptible to getting ganked. His shots are slow to unload with their slight delay, and while his mobility is pretty good with his super and his movement speed buffs, if you get the drop on him, you can absolutely take him out. But if not, then it might be a rough fight that you might want to back away from. However, the brawlers that really want to stay back though, that's the Marksman. Unfortunately for them, that's a luxury they're not going to get today. Now, I'm fully aware that this is not the most ideal scenario to test these brawlers, but really there isn't a great way to do it. But just for fun, if you put Trunk at Piper's max distance, he never even gets to attack her. So back to the normal range we go, and as expected, he smashes through these brawlers. Nani does deal a bunch of damage, but both Bonnie and Belle can't chew through that 10,000 hit points. And Janet's damage, it's just not enough. So yeah, of course a tank is going to beat these brawlers at this distance, but in a game, can he even get close to them? Well, that depends. Trunk does have a super that goes quite a ways to close the gap, so if he can get position, then he is just one super away from being at your doorstep. However, lucky for most of the marksmen, they have some means of getting away, either with a super or a gadget. So while this looks really bad, in a game, if you can keep Trunk from getting position on you, then you'll probably be alright. However, if not, those ants will be swarming you. And since we're being unfair, let's just put the support brawlers up there too and see what happens. Poco is up first, and his tunes may sound good, but they ain't taking down a tree. Gus throws balloons, but he is the one that gets popped. However, Pam, that is a different story, as she has the power to take him out, although just by the skin of her teeth. Barry's damage doesn't hardly make a dent, but Max makes good use of those fast shots and almost wins. Byron is, well, it's Byron, and Ruff's battle is rough. Gray gives a good shot, but comes up just short, and Doug tries his best, but needed a bit more damage to win. Jay Young is a great brawler, but tanks up close? Yeah, that's a no. So Pam was the lone bright spot here, which isn't a surprise as she normally has what it takes to fend off these big tanks, but the other brawlers weren't really meant for this kind of battle. Now in a game, you're going to be a target as a support brawler, and Trunk has a super to come right at you. If you find yourself in that situation, you do have a chance though, as his damage isn't nearly as bursty as some of the other ones. So use whatever gadgets or supers you have to gain some distance, and then hopefully you have some damage dealers around you to help you out. And speaking of damage dealers, let's see how they do. If there's one group of brawlers that are specifically designed to deal with tanks like Trunk, it's these ones. Except for Shelly at range. But you put her close, and yeah, she finishes the job. Nita doesn't have Bruce to protect her, so she falls, and Colt just doesn't have the health to be this close. 8-Bit, however, is one of the most potent brawlers in the game, and he blasts Trunk to bits. Egg Rico, he gets scrambled, and Carl's shots are too slow to get his damage off. Colette does work, but without a super, she can't seal the deal. However, Lola is a reliable tank counter, and it shows here. And a full heat Pearl is just way too hot to handle. However, Tara was just one shot away from a win. Eve gets sent back to the lobby, and fast, and even RT can't get through Trunk's shell. And a rat gets beat by some ants. Who would have thunk it? Lumi gives it her best, but fails, and a golden cactus gets turned into aloe vera. That's scientifically accurate, by the way. Surge was late to the party, but Chester makes a fool out of that Trunk. Now, Trunk actually puts up a pretty impressive score here, but in a game, I don't think it's going to be nearly that easy. Almost all of these brawlers have a way to shred Trunk. Colette has a super to blast him away, and one RT hypercharge will spell the end of Trunk's life. Tara has a pull, and Mo could just drill underground and take him out at the root. So yeah, if you get stuck up close, it might not be pretty, but all things being equal, the damage dealers were made for this, and if you play it smart, you'll be just fine. The brawlers that won't be fine, however, well, that's the throwers. Trunk can literally two-shot every single one of these throwers, and he does just that. But one interesting thing to see is that while these throwers lose, they all deal respectable damage before dying. Well, except for Tick, because, well, Tick. And this is actually one of Trunk's big weaknesses. He has a bit of delay to his shot when you activate it, meaning that shot doesn't happen right away, and that leaves a window open for that damage to come in. Now in a game, I actually kind of like this matchup for the throwers. Trunk's hitbox is big, so he's going to be an easier target to hit, and he's not super fast. He has no wall break, and while yes, he does have a super that might be able to get to you, as a thrower, your best friend is a wall. And while yes, he can deal damage through a wall, all you really have to do is back up a tile and keep lobbing those shots. Now, of course, if he does get to you, then yeah, you're in trouble. But if you play it right, you got very little to worry about. So with one group left, the controllers step up to the plate and quickly get beat down. Until Bo comes along and gets the first win. Now, Ems doesn't get full damage, but still makes it close, and Griff told Trunk to keep the change, chump. Gale isn't able to blow Trunk away, and Meeple's damage is just too slow to work. Gene was left wishing for another chance, but Mr. P and his double bounces actually comes pretty darn close. Squeak did some good damage, however, Lou was able to put Trunk on ice and then into deep freeze. However, Otis and Willow gave it their best shot, but this time, their best just wasn't good enough for a win. Chuck's damage is respectable, but not overwhelming. Charlie's yo-yo didn't have the power to take Trunk down, and when Finks tried, he was wishing that he could turn back time and decide to not fight Trunk. And while we know that sand can't beat a tree, you would think that Amber and her fire could. Not this time. So then, you have seen Trunk 1v1 versus every brawler in the game. How good is he? I actually think that he's pretty decent. Now, he is a tank, so naturally he's not going to be as versatile as some of the other classes of the brawlers are, but if you're looking for a tank that can work in a lot of situations, he's not a bad option. Obviously, his range is limited, but he does bring some good utility along with him to make up for that. His damage is very good, and honestly, he's a pretty fun brawler to play as well. Is he going to be the best tank in the game? No. Not with the likes of Draco and his new hypercharge running around, but is he a solid, viable option in many cases? Absolutely. With his ants, he has some good scouting, buffs and debuffs to hand out, and he should have no problem holding his own. Keeping him in that perfect range might get a bit tricky with bullets flying everywhere, but overall, he's a well thought out and good option. He's not completely overpowered, but he's also not very weak. Bottom line is, I like him, and I hope you like the update.